When my husband, Zenith Tech CEO Arthur Sterling, announced the target employee list for the new compensation restructuring plan, I, as the person in charge of 70% of the company's revenue, saw my name prominently displayed at the top. 10 minutes later, I submitted my resignation. As I left, I overheard Arthur on the phone. He said she was just throwing a tantrum. In 3 months, she'd be back. 3 days after I left, he stormed into the HR department, furious. When Arthur Sterling presented the restructuring list, the meeting room fell silent, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. Projected on the large screen was the phased executive compensation optimization plan. Below the first line of headings was my name, Valerie Sterling, Director of Strategic Accounts. Base salary reduced by 40%. Bonuses suspended. My hands were still on my laptop keyboard. 10 minutes earlier, I had sent Arthur an email with our third quarter forecast of contract renewals with 3 major clients. These 3 contracts accounted for nearly 70% of Zenith Tech's annual cash flow. 10 minutes later, I became the first victim of his restructuring plan. Arthur stood at the head of the long table. His tailored suit was spotless, and his voice was calm. He said the company was undergoing a transformation. Senior leadership needed to lead by example. I expected everyone on the list to fully cooperate. He didn't look at me. Or rather, he deliberately avoided my gaze. Sitting to his right was his new executive assistant, Chloe Mercer. She timidly looked up and said softly, "Arthur, isn't this a bit too sudden?" Valerie was in charge of many projects. She might be angry. She had been with the company for exactly a week. Her desk was right outside my department. But she knew nothing about our clients and contracts. Yet somehow, she had already secured a seat in the executive meeting. Arthur glanced at her, his tone immediately softening. At Zenith, we value holistic strategy, not just individual struggles. Someone in the room cleared their throat awkwardly. I saw the sales director, Julian Torres, turn instantly pale. He was someone I had personally mentored. Julian knew that during negotiations with European partners last month, I'd only slept 8 hours in 3 days. He also knew that the company survived last year entirely because I'd successfully salvaged 3 major clients who were about to leave. But Julian didn't say a word. Nobody did. Because the speaker was CEO Arthur Sterling, my husband of 5 years. I lowered my eyes and opened the official notification email that had just been sent to my inbox. Sender, HR. CC, CFO Arthur Sterling and the board. Timestamp, New Year. He'd already signed it off before the meeting even started. I downloaded the email as a PDF, took a screenshot of the room's display screen, and quietly uploaded both to my personal cloud drive. I did it so naturally that nobody noticed. Chloe was still talking. To be honest, I could accept a small pay cut. I'm new, and I don't want Valerie to shoulder this burden alone. Her voice was sweet. Her words sounded polite. But I could clearly see the organizational chart on the table in front of her. The document clearly stated that Tier 1, 2, and 3 strategic clients would be gradually transitioned to a new project team managed by Chloe Mercer over the next 3 months. So, this wasn't just a pay cut. He intended to break up my department, handing over my clients, my team, and my budget to her piece by piece. I suddenly found the whole thing ridiculous. The year we founded Zenith, Arthur sat on the floor of our cramped apartment in San Jose, holding a business plan no one believed. He looked at me and said, "Val, once Zenith Tech is on track, I'll get you the best, brightest office in the building." I believed him then. I went with him to investor roadshows, flew all over the country to meet clients, and was yelled at until 2 a.m. in sweltering conference rooms. Eventually, the company did get on track. But the most promising position went to Chloe, and I was put on the restructuring list to make room for her. Arthur finally turned his attention to me. "Valerie, you're a veteran here. You need to know what's best for the company." What's best for the company? I'd heard that phrase far too many times. Kohler is new. She's not familiar with the procedures yet. You need to mentor her. This is in the best interests of the company. My mother adores Chloe. Ignore her when she makes comparisons. This is for the greater good of the family. On my birthday, he drove to San Francisco International Airport to pick up Chloe, claiming she had just moved back to the US and had no one else to rely on. Supposedly, that was for our own good too. And now, I generate 70% of the revenue. Yet I should step back and pave the way for her. I slammed my laptop shut. The click wasn't loud. But everyone at the table turned to me. Arthur frowned. The meeting wasn't over yet. I stood up and pushed my chair back. My part. Chloe jumped. Her eyes instantly welling up with tears. Valerie. Please don't misunderstand. Arthur didn't mean that. If you're not satisfied, I can talk to HR. No need. I stared straight at her. You weren't the one who signed that list. Kohler turned pale. Arthur finally raised his voice. Valerie Sterling. We're in a corporate environment. I know it perfectly well. I picked up my phone. The screen flashed the email I just saved, the very reason I was following standard company procedure. With that, I turned and walked out of the meeting room. A gasp went up behind me. Arthur called. Valerie. I didn't turn around. The corridor was long. My face reflected in the glass walls, no tears. No hysteria. I was much calmer when the meeting started. The receptionist stood up immediately when she saw me approach. Valerie. Marcus is in his office. I nodded and walked straight into HR. My phone vibrated. A text from Arthur. Don't cause trouble. Save my face in this meeting. I stared at the words for 2 seconds. Took a screenshot. And saved it. He still thought I was just throwing a tantrum. The door to the HR director's office was a glass jar. Marcus Hayes looked up. His face first showed surprise. Then quickly shifted to a heavy, resigned expression. He stood up. Valerie. I placed my phone on his desk. The screen displayed a pay cut notification. Process my resignation. Effective immediately. Marcus froze. Immediately. He looked at me. Lowering his voice. Did Arthur know? I gave a dry laugh. 10 minutes ago. He had personally told me that the company valued overall strategy, not individual effort. Marcus remained silent. He had worked at Zenith Tech for 6 years. He had seen me revising project presentations at 3 a.m. He had been there last year at the dinner party when Arthur first raised his glass to investors. Completely oblivious to me standing right next to him, Marcus opened his work portal. His fingers hovering over the keyboard. Valerie. You are a key executive. Standard procedure requires a 30-day transition period. I pushed a thick, neatly labeled binder onto his desk. Project status. Client contacts. Key contract renewal dates. And risk assessment notes. I updated everything on the shared drive last night. The successor can sign off now. Marcus looked up. Stunned. My voice remained steady. I always take notes. He finally realized this wasn't a momentary emotional breakdown. 10 minutes later, the system generated a formal resignation letter. I electronically signed it. Confirmed. And clicked submit. The system beeped. The process had been escalated and awaited CEO approval. Just then, hurried footsteps came from the direction of the conference room. Arthur appeared at the HR office door. He looked angry. Valerie was outside. I didn't move. If you have something to say it here. Marcus lowered his head, suddenly becoming intensely interested in the monitor. Arthur suppressed his anger and went in. Do you know what you're doing? I'm willing. I glanced at him. I resigned because I was dissatisfied with your restructuring plan. No. You're not. I picked up a pen from the table and signed the last page of the paper handover record. I did this because I finally realized that in your value system, my interests always come below your most important interests. His brows furrowed even more. Chloe was just starting out. She felt overwhelmed. You're just making a mountain out of a molehill. In 3 months, I'll return everything to you. Why make such a fuss now? Several employees walked down the corridor, stopping near the door. Chloe came running up, breathless, and stood behind Arthur, her eyes brimming with tears. I looked at Arthur, and any remaining thought of explaining vanished instantly. In his eyes, stripping me of my championship title, taking my team, and publicly humiliating me were all collateral damage done to appease Kohler. His clever compromise was a promise to return what was already mine within 3 months. I capped my pen. Mr. Sterling. The resignation process is complete. Arthur's expression twisted. What did you just call me? I picked up my bag and walked past him. In the office. Are you Mr. Sterling? I stopped at the door. As for the house, we'll talk about it tonight. I didn't look at his face, but I heard Chloe whisper behind me. Arthur. I think I've gotten you into trouble. He didn't answer. The elevator doors opened. And I stepped inside. Through the mirror, I saw the diamond ring on my ring finger. I'd worn it for 5 years. The inside was engraved with "Together We Stand." I stared at it for a few seconds, then took it off and put it in the deepest zippered pocket of my wallet. The elevator door slowly closed. This time, I wouldn't hold my ground for anyone else's benefit. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, my phone was ringing incessantly. Arthur was calling. Arthur called again. Chloe called. I turned them all down. The receptionist blushed when she saw me. "Valerie, are you really leaving?" I took off my company badge and placed it on the marble countertop. "Yes." She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but couldn't find the right words. Longtime employees at Zenith Tech knew I was more than just the CEO's decorative wife. Arthur and I had painted the walls of our first office ourselves. I camped out in the lobby of our first major client for 3 days straight to get him 10 minutes of my time. When we faced our first major cash flow crisis, I sold my San Francisco apartment to pay 2 months' worth of employee salaries. There was nothing about this in the company memos. The only memo I received today was the one that put me on the layoff list. I was about to push open the revolving door when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Valerie." Arthur caught up with me. Chloe followed closely behind, clutching several folders tightly to her chest, looking bewildered and utterly innocent. People in the lobby turned to look at him. Arthur lowered his voice. "Are you really determined to turn this into an ugly public spectacle?" I stopped. "It's not me who looks ugly here." Chloe immediately stepped forward. "Valerie, please don't misunderstand. I swear I really didn't know about that restructuring list. I just arrived. I don't know anything. Arthur just wants to help me integrate into the team faster, not take things from you. Is that right?" I glanced at her. "So, what's that client handover list you're holding?" Chloe froze. She instinctively tried to hide the folders behind her back. Arthur frowned. "This is just a temporary coordination measure." The coordination required legally transferring my account group, budget, and contract approval authority to her name. A deathly silence fell over the lobby. Arthur's face finally showed genuine anger. "When did you become so vicious?" I chuckled softly. Those words were more sobering than the reorganization list. "So, when I stopped tolerating disrespect and demanded the truth. I was creating trouble." I took the printed handover confirmation from my bag. "Mr. Sterling, all project materials have been transferred to HR and CCD and sent to your inbox. According to company policy, all information, including client communication records, renewal dates, risk assessments, and outstanding invoices, has been archived." Arthur stood frozen. He clearly hadn't expected me to be so precise. He thought I would slam the door and leave, so he could shift the blame to me for messing things up. "Did you prepare this in advance?" "No. I didn't inform you beforehand." I placed the confirmation receipt on the reception desk. I had a rule for myself: never let anyone blame me for their mistakes. Kohler's eyes were completely red. "Valerie, you might think Arthur has been overly attentive to me ever since I moved back. But we grew up together. He's always respected you." "Respected?" I looked at Arthur. His respect for me was more like the respect I'd shown him in a high-level meeting after learning of my demotion from a slideshow. Not a one-on-one conversation a minute before the meeting started. Arthur's face darkened. "I was going to explain to you afterwards." "Explain what?" I glared at him. "Explain that Chloe was bewildered. So, I needed to give up my seat. Explain that you'd generously return what I'd built in 3 months. And I should be grateful." Hearing this, Kohler's expression instantly crumbled. Because that was exactly what Arthur had just said in the HR office. The way the employees in the lobby looked at them changed. People started looking down at their phones or giving Chloe strange looks. Arthur's jaw tightened. "Valerie, that's enough." I nodded. I agreed. I turned to leave. Arthur grabbed my wrist. His grip, though not causing a bruise, carried that familiar air of authority. For the past 5 years, whenever he grabbed my hand like that at business dinners, under the table, at his mother's house, I always stopped. Whenever I wanted to defend myself, he would grab my wrist. And for his sake, I could only swallow my anger. Today, I didn't stop. I looked down at his hand. "Let go." Arthur froze. I said, "Let go." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried throughout the hall. Chloe gasped softly. Arthur finally unfurled his curled fingers. A faint red mark remained on my skin. I pulled an antibacterial wipe from my bag and wiped my wrist, as if washing away a bad habit. Arthur. Until today. I am still your wife and a senior executive in your company. At least from today onward. The second title is invalid. He stared at me. Do you think clients will leave with you? I don't know. I threw the wipe in the trash. But I know that if a company so casually sacrifices its key leadership, clients won't work with it long term. Arthur scoffed. You're incredibly arrogant. I suppose I am. I nodded, pushed open the revolving door, and stepped outside. The Seattle air was crisp and cool. Company driver Dave jogged up, carrying my spare Yeti thermos. Valerie. You left the water. I've got it. Thanks. Dave. He hesitated for a moment, then said softly, Valerie. Everyone knows you got ripped off. I shook my head. It didn't matter if I felt ripped off. I glanced back at the glass facade of the Zenith Tech building. Everyone's minding their own business these days. My phone vibrated. System notification. Your resignation letter has been submitted and is awaiting CEO approval. I stared at the screen for a moment, then immediately forwarded it to Marcus in HR with a note. Please exercise my right to immediate, mutually agreed termination of employment in accordance with Article 4 of my employment contract. Handover complete. Please process my paid leave, pro rata bonus, and invested stock options according to standard procedure and provide written confirmation. Marcus replied immediately. Understood. Valerie. I got into an Uber, opened my laptop, and did a final backup of my personal files on the company cloud. 4 years. Arthur had called me his pillar of support. But even anchors get tired. On my way to my destination, Arthur called again. I declined. He texted. Let's talk when we get home tonight. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed 3 words. Yes. Everything will pass away. Then I opened the Amazon app, ordered 10 heavy-duty moving boxes, and asked for same-day delivery. Not for the office, but for the home. At 7 p.m., I walked into our townhouse on Capitol Hill. The smart lock recognized my fingerprint and beeped softly. Arthur and I bought the property in our 2nd year of marriage. I was in charge of the interior design. I chose the chandelier for the living room. Even the leather key tray by the door was something I brought back from a business trip to Italy. But standing in the lobby today, the space felt unfamiliar, like a furnished showroom. Arthur wasn't home yet. He probably assumed I'd make dinner as usual and then wait in the living room for his explanation. His conclusion was predictable: you're being too sensitive. I didn't bother turning on the living room light. I went straight to the home office and opened the safe on the wall. Inside were 3 stacks of documents. First, my personal assets, the title deed to my old apartment and bank statements proving I sold it to pay company salaries. The second document was early promissory notes from Zenith Tech and a release form for my role as personal guarantor on their first commercial loan. Third, equity agreements and records of key intellectual property and customer acquisitions over the years. These weren't things I'd prepared today. I come from the business world. I know the most unreliable thing in the world is a verbal promise. Arthur used to say, "We're family. Why do we have to be so obsessed with keeping track of everything?" I laughed and told him to avoid future misunderstandings. He hated it. But I still kept those documents. Not because I was plotting against him, but so I wouldn't wake up one day to find I couldn't prove everything I'd built. I was packing the folder into my suitcase when my phone lit up. It was a LinkedIn friend request from Chloe Mercer, with a private message attached. Valerie. I'm sorry. I really didn't want to affect your relationship with Arthur. I read it and ignored it. A second later, she texted me again. Valerie. I know you don't like me, but Arthur has been really tired these past few years. He says I'm the only one he can be himself with, without having to play the CEO anymore. You're his wife. Don't you want him to be at peace? I stared blankly at the screen. It seemed she wasn't just targeting me. In the office, she wanted to destroy my marriage too. She even dared to tell me she was his safe haven. I screenshotted the message and continued packing. At 8:30 p.m., the front door opened. Arthur walked in, bringing the chill of the night. He froze when he saw the pile of cardboard boxes by the office door. What are you doing? I sealed the last box full of documents. Moving out. His face darkened. Valerie. I can understand that your resignation was impulsive. But moving out. Is this really what you think? He walked into the office and saw the half-empty safe. His tone became stern. You're even taking your home files. I'm taking my personal financial documents. Clearly. Arthur looked at me like I was a stranger. Are you really going to go this far? I turned to face him. Extreme. Did you think this far when you put my name on the restructuring list? Did you think this far when you parachuted Kohler into my department to poach my clients? He rubbed his eyes. He pinched the bridge of his nose. I told you Kohler just arrived. She needs a win. You're a tough character. Taking a temporary step back won't hurt you. I laughed. Okay. I did take a step back. You know that's not what I meant. I know. I pushed a box toward the door with my foot. You mean I have to step back? But keep working behind the scenes. Accept a 40% pay cut. But keep smiling. Be replaced. But stay and train my successor. Teach her how to keep my job. Arthur was silent. Because I was absolutely right. A few seconds later. He lowered his voice. Valerie. We've been married for 5 years. Don't let office politics ruin everything for us. Office politics. I took out my phone and opened Kohler's text message. She texted that she was the only one around whom I didn't have to be CEO. Was that office politics? Arthur looked at the screen and frowned. That's not what she meant. You didn't even ask her. And you already know what she meant. My voice was as low as an icebox. Arthur. You defend her like muscle memory. A flash of annoyance crossed his eyes. Kohler's family has been through a lot. She's had a tough few years. You've had it too easy. The office was deathly silent. I stared at him. This has been the toughest year in the company's history. I flew to 4 cities in 3 days. I was hospitalized with a bleeding stomach ulcer. The next morning I pulled out the 4 and flew to Seattle to sign the contract. Your mother said I wasn't like a woman. That I was just a corporate machine neglecting her husband. I didn't say a word to her. You got drunk from the stress and threw up all over me. I cleaned you up until dawn before going to the breakfast presentation. I paused. Arthur. I've had it too easy. His lips parted slightly. But he didn't say anything. I knew he remembered everything. He was just used to it. He was used to me never complaining. Never yelling at me for my efforts. Never asking for credit. So when Chloe returned to town with red eyes and tears streaming down her face, his savior complex was triggered. She needed protection. Val should just put up with it. Arthur walked towards me and reached out to grab my arm. I dodged to the side. His hand hung in the air. Val. Don't talk to me like you're negotiating a board meeting. How do you expect me to talk to you? I asked. I begged you not to cut my salary. Not to give my clients to Chloe. Not to let her into my office. He remained silent. I reached into my pocket and placed the diamond ring on the table. Arthur's face turned deathly pale. Valerie. Resigning is a business decision. Moving out is a family matter. What's going on here? We have to go through legal channels. This is the plan. He looked like he'd been electrocuted. You want a divorce? I started divorce proceedings because of Chloe. I looked at him, realizing he didn't understand at all. Not because of Chloe, I said, emphasizing each word. But because every time you have to choose between me and her. You've never chosen me. The doorbell rang. The moving company arrived. 2 men in company polo shirts walked in, immediately sensing the tense atmosphere, and silently began moving boxes. Arthur stood in the office doorway, watching the boxes disappear one by one. He couldn't stop him now. He finally spoke. His voice hollow. Where are you staying tonight? A hotel. The moving company will take these things to the warehouse. You don't need it anymore. I grabbed my purse and headed for the front door. Our matching slippers were there. My slippers were already packed away. Arthur followed me out. His voice was much gentler. Val. Go ahead. But don't turn off location sharing on your phone. I'll worry. I took out my iPhone and, in front of him, turned off location sharing. From today onwards. Where I am is none of your business. His face turned deathly pale. I opened the front door. Behind me, he finally called out. Don't you really regret anything? I didn't turn around. I had many regrets. I stopped on the threshold. But I've accomplished my goal. Regret putting myself last. The door clicked shut behind me. And I heard something crack on the hardwood floor. Maybe a vase. Maybe Arthur's belated panic. But that wasn't a mess I needed to clean up anymore. The next morning at 9 a.m., Chloe moved into my office. Julian sent me a photo. In it, Kohler, wearing a cream-colored suit jacket, was sitting in my Herman Miller chair. On the table sat a hot matcha latte and a large bouquet of pink roses. Julian's caption was brief. Valerie. She told logistics to throw your fiddle leaf fig away. I stared at the photo for a few seconds without replying. That plant was a gift from my team. The company had survived the brutal first year. And I'd dragged that plant from a windowless closet to a corner office. It had thrived. Chloe had taken over my seat on her first day and made a complete mess of it. Perfectly in line with her personality. To claim a space, you must first erase all traces left by the builder. At 10 a.m., I had a Zoom call scheduled with Richard Caldwell. Rick is one of Zenith's top enterprise clients. And I've had him for 4 years. The agenda was to finalize a large-scale supply chain digitization contract for Q3. Before leaving, I had archived all the meeting documents and strategy notes. Julian told me that as long as Chloe followed the script, things wouldn't go wrong. But at 10:20 a.m., Julian texted me again. Valerie. Chloe has revised the business proposal. I replied with a question mark. Julian sent a screenshot. Chloe changed my carefully negotiated phased delivery model to a one-off package delivery and drastically reduced ongoing maintenance costs by 30%. That wasn't a discount. That was taking on a huge responsibility. In the short term, the client seemed to have gotten a great deal. In the long term, Zenith would lose money. And our engineering team would be overwhelmed by the delivery demands. I had just finished reading the text when my phone rang. Caller ID, Richard Caldwell. I answered Rick. His voice was tightly controlled, masking his deep-seated anger. Valerie. Do you still represent Zenith Tech? I paused for a moment. I resigned yesterday. There was a deathly silence on the other end. Then a cold laugh. I wasn't surprised. Miss Mercer had just informed me that she would be taking over the account. She couldn't even explain why the API logic for splitting Phase 1 into 3 modules. But she proudly announced that she could lower the price as a gesture of goodwill to longtime clients. I didn't comment on Kohler's performance. Rick. According to procedure, they should have received my handover documents by now. Whether I've seen them or not is irrelevant. Rick snapped. I wondered who would be responsible if implementation failed. That was the only important question. I was no longer a guarantor for Zenith. Rick. I've left the company. I can't make any guarantees on their behalf. You need written confirmation from their new account manager. Understood. Understood, Rick said. Hanging up. His tone softened. Valerie. Let's grab some coffee when things settle down. Just the two of us. I didn't overpromise. Thank you for your trust. Rick. I'll get in touch with you. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. Boundaries of responsibility after departure. The first document was submitted immediately. A memo recording the conversation. Then I wrote an email to Rick. Main body confirms transition. Cabin transition complete. The content was simple. Formal confirmation that, effective yesterday, I have initiated resignation proceedings and no longer have the authority to represent Zenith Tech in any negotiations, contracts, or assume any responsibility. IBCC is my personal inbox. And CCD is the common alias for Zenith Tech Project Management. 15 minutes later, Arthur called. I picked it up. He came on aggressively. Rick Caldwell. What the hell was that email you just sent? Just as it sounds. Do you know how much he trusts you to send you an email like that? What will he think of this company? My voice was calm. He'll consider the scope of responsibility. Arthur was furious. Valerie. You can leave if you want. But don't ruin our plans when you leave. Arthur. It's not that I'm sabotaging you behind your back. I continued. And there was silence on the other end of the line. Did she see the first phase implementation report before Kohler revised the plan? Did she ask the engineering department about indirect costs? Did she see the client's hidden specifications? He sounded like he was making excuses. She took over everything. It's normal that she can't know everything. Couldn't you have quietly corrected her privately? Corrected whom? Chloe. I laughed. Arthur. You demoted me. Gave her my account. And now you want me to secretly write proposals for her so she doesn't look incompetent. Does that sound absurd? His tone lowered. Valerie. Do you have to be so vicious with every word? I showed great restraint. If I weren't, I would have called Rick Caldwell and told him that the plan he was considering had significant implementation risks. Arthur was silent. He knew I was right. A few seconds later, he turned and left. Go home tonight. We need to talk. I'm not coming back. Then I'll come find you. No. I could hear him grinding his teeth. Which hotel are you staying at? I glanced at my phone and saw that location sharing was still off. None of your business. He hung up. That afternoon, Julian texted me that his Zoom call with Rick Caldwell had abruptly ended. Chloe burst into tears on camera. Rick asked her 3 questions. Why was the Phase 1 deployment delayed by 2 weeks? Why couldn't the internal client access hierarchy be merged? Why couldn't the maintenance costs for Phase 2 be limited to 10%? Chloe couldn't answer a single one. Finally, Arthur had to call himself to salvage the situation. But Rick Caldwell hung up after saying only one sentence. Arthur, I'm not spending millions of dollars to run a training camp for your junior staff. This sentence immediately went viral on the strategic client's Slack channel. At 4 p.m., my former direct subordinate, Liam, called me. He sounded very nervous. Valerie, the team is a complete mess right now. What happened? Chloe demanded back-end access to all client data, including my personal encrypted negotiation logs. We refused. She said it was a direct order from the CEO. I stopped typing. My personal notes contained highly sensitive, though not confidential, information about interpersonal relationships, a client's spouse's illness, the CEO's golf handicap, trigger points in negotiations. A certain CTO vehemently disliked Friday afternoon meetings. It had taken me years to cultivate this wisdom. This wasn't some cheat code for Chloe to prove she deserved the chair. Liam, company policy dictates you can only transfer officially archived assets. Personal relationship notes are not company property. Don't hand them over. Liam sighed heavily. Got it. He paused. Valerie, are you really not coming back? I looked out the hotel window. Traffic on I-5 was like an endless, slow-moving river. Liam, no one is irreplaceable. But don't pin your hopes on those who are gone. Stand your boundaries. He was silent for a long time. Got it. Arthur texted me after the call ended. A client made Chloe cry today. Are you happy now? I looked at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Before replying, a client asking basic questions doesn't constitute an abuse of power. The problem is being completely unable to answer them. He didn't reply to the text. At 9 p.m., Chloe posted a photo on Instagram of herself with a pink rose in her hand. My desk read, "The crown is heavy, but I won't let down those who believe in me." Growth. The number of women in the tech industry. I saw Julian really liked it. Not to support her, but to get the message on his feed so he could screenshot it and send it to me. I texted him. Ignore it. Write down everything you do at work. Julian replied with a crying laughing emoji. 10 minutes later, Maya, my former close finance manager, sent me a screenshot of an internal budget approval. Chloe's client relations contingency budget had just been urgently increased by $80,000. Approver, Arthur Sterling. Memo. Client relations repair. Brand management. Special hospitality expenses. I stared at that content for a long time and finally understood Kohler's strategy. She wasn't competent at actual project work, so she planned to spend money to appease clients. This money was directly diverted from my team's fourth quarter operational budget. I saved the screenshot. Maya texted Valerie. I don't know if this counts as evidence, but I think you should know. I replied. That's right. Thank you. That evening, I merged the 3 documents into one PDF, the restructuring list, the client handover list, and the budget reallocation approval. Individually, they seemed like ordinary corporate cleaners. Together, they painted a picture that was obvious. Arthur wasn't acting on impulse. It was all his doing. I was supposed to step down, and Chloe was supposed to take over. He never imagined I'd actually walk out that door. By the 3rd day, Zenith Tech was in complete chaos. First, Rick Caldwell's company issued a formal legal seizure order, suspending the contract. The language was cold and unforgiving. Due to significant changes in the account manager and proposed implementation metrics, we needed to pause for a period to reassess the risk factors. Then, 2 other long-term clients requested a freeze on their third-quarter renewals. The reasons were exactly the same: unstable account management, fickle proposals, and high implementation risk. Arthur didn't tell me about this. Julian did. He said the entire strategic client's floor was like a fire alarm had been sounded. Since 9 a.m., Chloe had been sitting in Arthur's office crying, while project managers were arguing loudly in the war room. I wasn't gloating. I just checked the calendar. 3 days. Arthur had arrogantly claimed that the clients wouldn't leave with me. He was half right. They didn't leave with me. They slammed on the brakes, trying to figure out who was managing their money and debt. At 10:40 a.m., Marcus from HR texted me, "Valerie, Arthur is in my office." A second later, he demanded I rescind your resignation. I read the text but didn't reply. Less than a minute later, Arthur called. I answered and immediately pressed record. "Arthur, I'm recording," he stammered, clearly jolted off. "What? Why?" "Boundary management." He took a deep breath. Rapid and heavy. "Valerie, come back." That wasn't a request. It was an executive order. I leaned back in my chair. "In what capacity?" "Director of Strategic Accounts." "Salary restored." "Restored." "Team autonomy restored." "Restored." "Chloe has exited account management." Silence on the other end of the phone. I gave a dry laugh. "You see. You know exactly where the problem lies." Arthur's voice turned desperate and cold. "Now is not the time to argue about pride. 3 clients have just frozen their contracts. The company is losing money. The company's problems. You are the CEO. This place was built by you and me. 3 days ago, my optimization ranking was at the top." He sounded as if he was choked. After a moment, he said through gritted teeth, "I can remove this list. But you can't remove this humiliation." I lowered my voice. "Arthur, do you really want to record everything?" "Yes." I checked the files on my laptop. "Starting today, we're going to compile statistics on every single cent." I heard Marcus's voice in the background trying to reassure Arthur. But Arthur suddenly shouted, "Marcus, cancel her resignation immediately during the workday." Marcus sounded frightened, but he stood his ground. "Arthur." Valerie completed the handover. "California and Washington are arbitrary hiring states. We can't force her to stay. You didn't refuse to resign within 24 hours. So the system processed it automatically. It's finalized. I'm the CEO. System logs and labor laws remain in effect." "Arthur." That reminded me of years ago when the company was just starting out. Arthur hated messy processes. He used to say, "Valley, as we scale, our compliance must be impeccable so we can withstand any audit." He never imagined that the impeccable process he had built would ultimately be what stopped him. A loud thud came from the other end of the line. Like a fist hitting a table. "She's my wife." Marcus hesitated. "Arthur. Valerie's employee status is finalized. Her status as a wife is outside my jurisdiction." Holding the phone, I felt a strange feeling. Both absurd and deeply satisfying. He finally said it. "She's my wife. Therefore, demoting her, sacrificing her, replacing her with Kohler, and locking her back at her desk with a marriage certificate after the company goes bankrupt are all acceptable." I spoke. "Arthur." The other end of the room fell silent. "Did you hear Marcus? As an employee, I have to follow labor laws. As a wife, I follow family laws." Arthur's voice choked. "Are you really going to drag our marriage into this?" "You dragged it in first," I said calmly. "When you asked me to understand. Chloe. It was because I'm your wife. When you thought I was your wife and should be your shield. That's how the marriage was from the start." Before hanging up, I heard Kohler's voice in the background. She must have rushed into the HR office. She sounded breathless. "Arthur. Should I go apologize to Valerie? I don't want you two arguing because of me." Arthur didn't answer. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Marcus sent me a photo. My resignation papers were on his desk. Arthur stood beside them, looking like a ghost. Marcus texted, "Valerie. I handled everything exactly as instructed." I replied, "Thank you, Marcus." He replied, "Keep a record of all his instructions." I thought of that. By the afternoon, Zenith's Slack channel was buzzing with rumors. Some said I was retaliating by poaching clients. Some said I was throwing a tantrum and abusing my wife's privileges. Others said Kohler was the victim of the toxic environment because she was assigned a hot potato. I didn't defend myself. Arguing with anonymous rumors was a waste of time. I simply sent formal emails to 3 long-term clients, reiterating my departure and confirming that I bore no responsibility for Zenith's deliverables. I added, "If you require independent risk assessment consulting services in the future, I'd be happy to discuss it privately." I wasn't poaching. I was building a firewall. That evening, Rick Caldwell replied, "Valerie, are you free for coffee tomorrow afternoon? Let's talk about your future, not Zenith." I stared at the email. For the first time, I truly felt that leaving Arthur hadn't plunged me into an abyss. I still retained my professional reputation, my judgment, and my autonomy. At 7 p.m., Arthur's mother, Eleanor, called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Valerie, darling, what are you two doing? What's with this little squabble between husband and wife?" Arthur said, "Your anger is affecting the company. Come home. Help him sort out these client relationships. Women shouldn't be so stubborn. My wife dictates the atmosphere at home." I heard this and saved it. I'd heard this lecture countless times in over 5 years. Eleanor idolized Kohler. She said Kohler was gentle, submissive, and well-mannered, while I was too much of a career woman, too cold, and not a good wife. Now that the company was in trouble, she suddenly remembered my role as a wife. I texted her back, "Eleanor, for company matters, please contact Zenith Tech's management team. Regarding my marriage, I will handle it directly with Arthur." She replied immediately, "You just called me Eleanor." I didn't reply. At 10 o'clock that night, Arthur appeared outside my hotel. The front desk called to say Mr. Sterling was looking for me. I went to the window and looked down. His Tesla was parked under a street lamp. He was leaning against the car door, smoking. He almost never smoked. I looked at him for a few seconds, then drew the sheer curtains. I told the front desk I wasn't going to see anyone. I knew he was panicking, but not because he had lost me. At least not yet. He was panicking because he had lost control of the company. Clients were leaving, and Chloe was in jeopardy. He finally realized that I wasn't the position he could regain in 3 months. I was a living person he had systematically deleted from the servers. The next morning, Eleanor Sterling kept calling me. I didn't answer a single time. At noon, she called from their estate landline on Mercer Island. I answered. She opened her mouth with a sharp shout. "Valerie, how long are you going to keep this up?" I sat at the table in my hotel room, flipping through the consulting documents Rick Caldwell had sent me. "Eleanor, is this an emergency?" My calling her by her first name had infuriated her. "You don't even call me mom anymore." My marriage to Arthur wasn't officially dissolved yet, but the paperwork could be adjusted based on the current state of our relationship. Silence. Eleanor clearly hadn't expected me to speak to her like she was an opposition lawyer. She suppressed her anger and said sharply, "Come to my house for dinner tonight. Arthur will be there too. Whatever it is, we need to settle it face to face." What's with that look? A wife trying to ruin her husband's company. I didn't ruin it. The client left because of him. How is it not your fault? They froze the contract as soon as you left. They froze the contract because of a change in liability. And the new plan was too risky. Eleanor scoffed. "Don't give me those corporate jargon. In the end, you're just throwing a tantrum because you can't stand Chloe around." I looked out the window. Of course. In their eyes, all the operational failures were blamed on me. Their jealous and hysterical wife. I initially wanted to refuse, but then I reconsidered and agreed. Some things are better resolved at the dinner table than in public. At 7 o'clock in the evening, I drove to the estate on Mercer Island. The formal dining room was already packed. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, Arthur to her right, and Chloe next to him. She wore a light blue cashmere dress and looked frail. As soon as she saw me, she stood up immediately. "Valerie, I didn't want to come, but Mrs. Sterling said we needed to talk." I glanced at her. "Thank goodness you're here." Her expression twitched. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. "Valerie, watch your tone. Chloe is a guest here. A guest who sits next to someone else's husband and seems so comfortable." The dining room fell silent. Arthur frowned. "Valerie." I tossed my bag onto an empty chair and sat down. "Weren't we here to talk? Then let's talk." Eleanor gritted her teeth. Let's eat first. I'm not hungry, Arthur interjected. Mom. Let's get straight to the point. He looked at me. His eyes red. The company needs you back to stabilize the accounts. Your salary. Your title. Everything is back. You'll be in charge of the strategic clients department. What about Chloe? I asked. Chloe immediately lowered her head. I can leave as long as you're back. Valerie. I never wanted anything from you. Arthur just felt I needed to start over. I interrupted her. Start over. Starting with my office chair. Chloe's eyes welled up with tears. Eleanor immediately flared up. You're older. And more experienced. Can't you give her some space? Chloe has had a terrible few years. She's not as tough as you. She's just back. Arthur just wants to look after her a little. Is that illegal? No. I nodded. Taking care of her isn't illegal. Using my salary, my team, my clients, and my budget to take care of her. That's illegal. Eleanor was silent. Arthur sighed. Heavy. I admit I handled it terribly. Terribly. I pulled a printed document from my bag and threw it in the center of the mahogany table. Or rather, it was meticulously planned. Eleanor reached for the document. First page. HR restructuring list. Second page. Client handover list. Third page. Chloe's $80,000 budget reallocation. Fourth page. The organization's request to move Chloe to my office. Every document was timestamped before the board meeting I was rated at. Arthur's face grew increasingly grim with time. Chloe gripped the fabric of her dress tightly. Her knuckles turning white. Eleanor didn't understand technology. But she understood dates. What is this? Is this what you call a tantrum? I said. No one spoke. I continued. My pay cut wasn't some temporary cost-saving measure. Handing over my clients to Chloe wasn't some temporary instruction. It was all planned in advance. You just forgot to inform me. Arthur stared at me. Where did you get these internal documents? From a system I had access to. His gaze turned cold. You accessed the company server after you left. Every file here was downloaded before I left. I looked directly at him. Mr. Sterling. Don't try to label me a corporate spy. Chloe suddenly burst into tears. Valerie. I swear I didn't know this would upset you so much. Arthur just said you were strong and that temporarily giving up some resources wouldn't affect your position. I looked at her. Chloe. Don't put all the blame on him. Your electronic signature is on the client handover list. Her face turned deathly pale. Eleanor immediately rushed forward to defend her. She'd only been with the company a short time. What did she know about paperwork? Arthur made her sign. And so she signed. Yes. I scoffed. So I simply couldn't understand why someone who wouldn't even look at a signature would be appointed head of the strategic clients department. Those words slapped me across the face. The restaurant fell silent. Arthur finally snapped. Enough. He looked at me. His voice dangerously suppressed. I invited you here tonight to resolve issues. Not to interrogate us. I met his gaze. You've misunderstood. I placed the last document on the table. I'm here tonight to inform you that I will never return to Zenith Tech. Arthur's pupils contracted sharply. Furthermore, I continued. I've hired lawyers. And I have a divorce settlement. A marital property division agreement. A repayment agreement for the funds I invested in Zenith's seed round. A vesting schedule for my stock options. And an agreement for direct transfers of my salary from my personal account. Everything. It will be audited and accounted for. Eleanor jumped up. The chair scraping against the floor. Valerie. Are you trying to destroy Zenith? I won't destroy it. I looked at Arthur. Deciding to treat me as dispensable. Arthur looked terrified. Are you really willing to destroy everything? I grabbed my bag. Marriage isn't an arrangement where one party constantly compromises while the other uses the guise of the bigger picture to shirk responsibility. Chloe burst into tears. Valerie. Please don't do this. Arthur is under too much pressure. He's not ungrateful. He's overwhelmed by the pressure. I turned to look at her. Chloe. Your greatest talent is using your incompetence to make people feel obligated to take care of you. Her sobs paused abruptly. I'm sorry. I'm no longer the administrator. With that, I stood up and walked away. Arthur caught up with me and grabbed me in the driveway. The night air was icy cold. He looked at me. And for the first time, I saw real, naked exhaustion in his eyes. Val. Was a divorce really necessary? I didn't answer immediately. I had waited for him for 5 years. I waited for him to see how hard I tried. I waited for him to defend me to his mother. I waited for him to reject Chloe. I waited for him to at least give me a polite warning before humiliating me in front of the board. He never did. Not even once, I whispered. Arthur. It's not that you didn't know it would hurt me. You just thought I would stay and suffer. He was pale. I walked past him and opened my rental car. Behind me. His voice choked. Where are you going? I opened the door to life. This time. He didn't chase after me. The next morning, Maya from the finance department asked to meet me at a local coffee shop. After she sat down, she looked back to make sure no one was around in the office before sliding an encrypted USB drive across the table. Valerie. I don't know if I should give this to you. I didn't take it immediately. What was it? Kohler's expense reports, budget notes, and several draft business proposals she had revised. Maya pursed her lips. I didn't want to take sides. But she had dragged finance into this mess. She was trying to include events like lavish dinners and spa days in client retention costs. But with little success. I checked the hard drive. Did you export these files within the authorized scope? Yes. Did you bypass any security protocols? No. Everything had to be approved by me. I only picked up the hard drive then. Thank you, Maya. But take care of yourself. Don't risk your life for me. She gave a wry smile. You always said that. I paused. She added softly. Everyone in the office knows you're not a bad person. They're just afraid of Arthur. I gripped my coffee cup tightly. Speechless. I used to think that as long as I worked hard, Arthur would see my value. Turns out everyone else saw it too. The only one who chose to be blind was precisely the most important person. Back in my makeshift workspace, I plugged in the hard drive. Kohler's offer was worse than I'd imagined. She didn't just drastically lower the price. She copied and pasted most of a highly customized architectural proposal I'd written last year for Rick Caldwell, changed the cover, and sent it to another client in the logistics industry. The problem was, the architectures were completely incompatible. The security protocols were entirely different. Technically, implementing the proposal was impossible. Plagiarism was a breach of contract. I opened both documents side by side and highlighted every difference in red. At 2 p.m., Arthur texted, "Did you steal company documents?" I was amused by this utterly shameless behavior. Typical Arthurian style, protect Chloe first, then interrogate me. I replied, "Every document I have is legally obtained and, strictly speaking, related to my own project responsibilities and authority." He replied immediately, "Don't push things to the brink." I called him. He answered the first ring. "Valerie Arthur. I have a question for you. Did Kohler copy and paste my previous proposal?" There was a dead silence on the other end. "She used a departmental template," he finally said. Using a template and copying and pasting a customized back-end architecture are two different things. That's malfeasance. She's new to the industry. She can't be perfect on her first day. So, do you want me to fix it for her again? He hesitated, caught in a dilemma. After a few seconds, he almost pleaded. "This contract is crucial. You just need to rewrite it for her privately. You don't even need to sign your name." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. "You don't even need to write your name on it." He so casually asked me for an eraser. For the past 5 years, I've quietly cleaned up many messes for him. When venture capital term sheets changed at the last minute, I negotiated to change them back to the original. When the engineering department missed the sprint, I went to buy time for the client. Kohler barged into his mother's birthday party, and I gave her a warm welcome. Now Kohler is guilty of professional misconduct. He wants me to ghostwrite the solution. On what grounds? I asked. Arthur's voice hardened. The reason is that half of this company's success is built on you. Half of this company's money was earned by me. That's why you put me on the restructuring list. I told you long ago that what I did was wrong. Making a mistake is not the same as apologizing. Silence fell again. He wasn't used to my precision, my uncompromising nature. In the past, if he said I was under a lot of pressure, I would back down. If he said, "Stop it," I would compromise. Now, I'm like a brick wall, and he doesn't know how to climb over it. Arthur, as of the time of my resignation, I have no outstanding debts to Zenith Tech. Do you want to see the ship sink? I'll make you pay for it. His breathing became heavy. Valerie. What do you really want? A divorce. Silence. After a long pause, he said in a low voice. Don't threaten me with divorce. This isn't a threat. I glanced at the legal documents on the table. It was a notification. I hung up. Half an hour later, I received an email from Chloe Mercer. She didn't just email me. She copied the entire leadership team in Arthur's HR and strategic clients departments. Regarding Ms. Sterling's continued interference after her resignation, the email was a masterpiece of corporate gaslighting. She wrote that while she respected my tenure, my continued informal communications with long-term clients had created a hostile transition environment and placed unnecessary pressure on the new task force. She claimed she was willing to take responsibility to maintain peace but hoped I wouldn't let personal emotions harm the company's interests. The internal Slack channel must have exploded. Chloe was clever. She portrayed herself as a bullied junior employee and me as a resentful, jealous ex-wife. If I remained silent, this story would become reality. If I attacked her, I would prove her point. I clicked all replies. I attached 4 documents, actual legally reserved emails from 3 clients. A side-by-side redline comparison of her altered proposals. A plagiarism analysis showing her copying and pasting proprietary architecture. My final resignation receipt. And a disclaimer. My text message contained only one sentence. Please specify which of the catastrophic technical glitches recorded above were caused by my emotions. I pressed send for 10 minutes. Not a single person replied. 20 minutes later, Liam texted me. Valerie. The whole floor just saw that. Julian texted immediately afterward. She's in Arthur's office right now. Sobbing. I closed my laptop. This war was no longer mine. At least not the kind I needed to fight in the trenches. That evening, Rick Caldwell called me. Valerie. You have 1 minute. Always. Rick. I've heard rumors that Zenith's leadership portrays you as a rebellious former employee who sabotaged their business. I smiled faintly. Rumors. Rick smiled grimly. ARR drove to my office today to settle things. He claimed Kohler was simply inexperienced and promised the company was arranging for you to work behind the scenes as her consultant. I narrowed my eyes. I figured I definitely wouldn't agree to that. Rick's tone turned serious. Getting down to business. So, I want to ask you this question. If you were currently operating as an independent consultant, would you be willing to accept a commission to conduct an external risk assessment of my entire supply chain? I paused. It was a fantastic opportunity, but also a tightrope walk fraught with legal risks. I couldn't immediately poach Zenith's clients after resigning, but I could definitely work as a third-party auditor, completely unaffected by Zenith's intellectual property, representing only Rick's position. We can negotiate the terms, I said cautiously, provided it strictly segregates all valid contracts related to Zenith. And all documentation is reviewed by the legal department. Rick laughed. That's the Valerie I know. After hanging up, I looked at the Seattle skyline. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur. Are you really consulting for Rick Caldwell? I replied. It's within the scope of my confidentiality agreement and non-compete agreement. Yes. It's my legal right. He replied immediately. You would never have done this to me before. I read the text and slowly exhaled. The old me. The old Valerie would assess her stress levels before taking any action. The current Valerie analyzes contracts carefully. That's the difference. I hadn't planned to attend the Pacific Technology Leadership Summit, but Rick Caldwell gave me a VIP pass. We're not talking about Zenith, he told me on the phone. We're talking about macro trends in the industry. Don't let a bad breakup wipe you out of this ecosystem. Valerie. Those words struck a chord with me. For 5 years, my identity had been. My relationship with Zenith Tech was so close that industry insiders referred to me as Arthur Sterling's brilliant wife. Few people called me Valerie directly. So I donned a sharp black blazer, clipped on my name tag, and drove to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. I didn't sit in the VIP section, but in the back, listening to corporate clients discuss third-quarter budget constraints. Half an hour into the morning meeting, Arthur and Chloe walked in. Chloe, dressed in a stylish gray suit, looked every bit the Silicon Valley genius, her Zenith Tech badge prominently displayed. She spotted me immediately, her smile freezing. Arthur saw me too, paused, then regained his composure. When Zenith's written discussion began, Arthur stepped onto the stage. He delivered a well-organized presentation, explaining how Zenith had recently streamlined its organizational structure, empowering younger, more agile teams to better serve its clients. Chloe sat in the front row, humbly bowing her head, playing the role of a rising star. I sat in the back, expressionless. Everything went smoothly. Until the QA session. Rick Caldwell picked up the microphone. Arthur, I'd like to confirm. Who is currently in charge of the strategic clients department? Arthur hesitated. Chloe Mercer is coordinating this department. I am personally overseeing the transition. Rick nodded. And Valerie Sterling. The banquet hall fell silent. Arthur glanced at me in the back row. Kohler turned around. A flicker of panic in her eyes. Arthur cleared his throat. Valerie is temporarily leaving for personal reasons. I stood up. I didn't wait for the microphone. My voice echoed clearly throughout the banquet hall. Let me clarify, I said. I'm not on vacation. I'm officially resigning. A murmur rippled through the hundreds of tech executives. Arthur's face hardened. Kohler immediately rose from her seat. Her voice trembled. Accusing. Valerie. This is an industry summit. Is this really a place to publicly discuss internal company matters? Discontent. I looked down at her. I'm clarifying an important fact to the market. Rick Caldwell immediately sided with me. Ms. Mercer. This level of personnel change isn't about internal discontent. It's a risk factor for your clients. Another executive in the second row interjected. We've always liaised with Zenith through Valerie. A sudden departure without a handover requires an explanation. Chloe's face flushed rapidly. And she forced a smile. Don't worry. Everyone. Valerie left detailed documentation. And I'm working day and night to ensure a smooth delivery. Zenith Tech isn't just my company. We won't go bankrupt because one person leaves. It was indeed a good PR strategy. But the sharks in the room had already smelled blood. Rick Caldwell turned his attention directly to her. Ms. Mercer. In your revised second phase rollout plan, you lowered the maintenance fees to below market levels. Can you explain to everyone how Zenith intends to subsidize these server costs over their 36-month lifespan? Chloe looked at Arthur like a startled deer. Arthur reached for the microphone. But Rick held up one hand. I'm asking account manager Ms. Mercer. She should know this. Chloe's forced smile vanished instantly. She flipped through her notes. Her voice trembling. We plan to optimize these costs in future iterations. So. You don't know. The room fell silent. Chloe's eyes instantly filled with tears. She turned to look at me. Looking pitiful. Valerie. Look. They only want you. I work so hard. Why won't anyone give me a chance? Before I could even speak, a female executive sitting next to me spoke up. Her tone full of contempt. Ms. Mercer. Corporate clients aren't kindergarten teachers. We're not spending millions of dollars to grade your learning curve. That was more hurtful than anything I'd anticipated. Chloe completely broke down. Arthur stood on the stage. Utterly humiliated. He stared. I looked at him pleadingly. Hoping I would take the microphone. Defuse the tension. Turn things around. And save the company's reputation. Before. I would have definitely stepped in. Changed the subject. Saved Zenith's stock price. And made Arthur look like a genius. But today. I simply sat back down. Crossed my legs. I didn't want to be his savior anymore. Arthur had to rely on himself. He stammered and gave a perfunctory answer. Rick. Let's discuss the fine-grained architecture privately, Rick Caldwell said loudly. Without pressing further. Making sure everyone in the room could hear. Arthur. We didn't buy the Zenith brand. We bought Valerie's execution. All eyes in the room turned to me. Chloe burst into tears. And Arthur looked sickly. I stood up again. Looking directly at Rick. Thank you for your support. Rick. However. I am no longer an employee of Zenith Tech and cannot comment on their current deliverables. I glanced around. If anyone needs independent advice, they can contact me through the following channels. Go through the proper legal channels. If you still have a valid contract with Zenith, contact their CEO directly. With that, I grabbed my bag and walked out the back door. There were no insults. No shouts. But everyone in the room understood what I meant. My relationship with Zenith was over. In the valet driveway outside the hotel, Arthur caught up with me. Valerie. I stopped on the steps. He strode up to me. His chest heaving. Did you really have to humiliate me like that in public? I looked at him. Which of my words was a lie? He couldn't answer. You told a room full of clients I was on vacation, I corrected you. You put Chloe in charge. And then a client asked her a basic math question. I tilted my head. Ah. Humiliation isn't done to you by others. It's the environment you create. His eyes were filled with anger and panic. You knew Chloe would break down under this pressure. So why did you put her in that position? He froze. I couldn't answer that question. Because the truth was heartbreaking. He wanted to give the crown to Chloe, but expected me to shoulder the burden. He wanted to play her hero, to use my abilities to support everything. But reality wasn't like that. The hotel door suddenly opened, and Chloe ran out, her face smeared with mascara. Arthur. I'm sorry. I embarrassed you. Arthur instinctively turned around and gave her a half hug, as if to protect her. It was a deeply ingrained reflex. And the last shred of doubt in my heart vanished into the Seattle fog. I looked at them standing together and actually laughed. Arthur turned away, adopting a defensive stance. What's so funny? I'm laughing because I never noticed this before. His expression changed. I continued. You know how to protect others. But you've never thought about protecting me. Chloe's crying stopped abruptly. Arthur stood frozen on the sidewalk. Those words hitting him like a hammer blow. He felt like he'd been punched hard. I didn't look at them again. The valet brought my rental car over. I got in. Just as I was closing the door, Arthur suddenly grabbed the door frame. Wall. Wait. Let's talk. I looked down at his hand gripping the metal door. Mr. Sterling. Don't cause trouble in front of the client. His fingers loosened. I closed the door. After the car drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Chloe stood beside him, clutching his sleeve. But Arthur just stared blankly at my car. It's pointless to wake up too late. From that day on, Arthur started desperately trying to contact me. First, by phone, which I didn't answer. Then by email. He offered me a large sum of money to return as an outside consultant, to appease the board and stabilize staff turnover. Name your price, I replied with just one sentence. I rejected all offers related to Zenith Tech. Then came the text message. He told me that marriage wasn't, it was a contract that could be terminated at any time through HR. I didn't reply. Finally, he appeared outside the heavily guarded luxury apartment building in Belltown where I had moved in. I had just returned from retrieving a package from the lobby when I saw him standing by his car. He looked terrible. Much thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. And his suit was baggy. He saw me and strode over. Val, I stopped in front of the glass door, holding the Amazon package. How did you find my address? He didn't answer. I frowned. Arthur. Did you have someone follow me? I was just worried about you. Following and worrying are two different things. He turned his face away. My mom once had Dave, the driver, follow your Uber. I gave a cold laugh. That's just awful. So typical of your family. A flicker of shame crossed his face. I've already reprimanded her for it. You always reprimand her afterward. I clutched my bag tighter. But in the end, I'm always the one who gets humiliated. He looked at me, his voice lowering. Val, I know you're deeply hurt this time. I didn't speak. This was the first time in 5 years he'd publicly acknowledged my pain. But the statute of limitations had expired. He continued. I've been thinking. Reorganizing the list. I shouldn't have done it without consulting you. And the handover with Chloe was too rushed. Just rushed. I asked. He swallowed hard. You don't understand what I mean. His eyes were bloodshot. What do you want me to say? Admit I was wrong. Okay. I was wrong. His voice sounded frustrated, but also incredibly annoyed. As if he were doing something unbecoming. I looked at him. Arthur. Where exactly did you go wrong? He froze. This question was harder for him than the Series C funding round. He finally said in a low voice. I shouldn't have put your name on the list. Not enough. I shouldn't have given your account to Chloe. Still not enough. He finally exploded. Valerie. What's wrong with you? What do you want from me? A deep weariness washed over me. Arthur. It's not that you won't apologize. It's that you don't understand what you've done. His face darkened. Your sin isn't that organizational chart, I said. Your sin is treating me as your eternal lifeline. You thought you could spoil Chloe. Give her a vain title. Sacrifice my reputation. And then I'd silently pay for your generosity. He gritted his teeth. I never treated you as my lifeline. You were the one who did. I looked him straight in the eye. Chloe messed up the proposal. And you called me. The company's facing a cash flow crisis. And you call me. Your mother insulted me on Thanksgiving. And you remained silent. Now, with our marriage on the verge of collapse and the board pressuring you, you suddenly realize I've been hurt. I approached him. My voice icy. You always wait until the fire gets out of control before you think about whether I've been hurt too. Arthur's throat bobbed. I was just thinking about the two of us. We don't need to be so petty. Yes. I nodded. Because we don't care. My investment doesn't count. Because we don't care. My humiliation doesn't matter. Because we don't care. My office can be handed over to a junior assistant. Because you thought you could return it to me in 3 months. And I'd say thank you. He turned pale. I turned to go inside. He grabbed the cardboard box from my hand. Don't go. Let go. He didn't. Today is our wedding anniversary. I paused. I'd really forgotten. May 18th. The day we got our marriage certificate at City Hall. Before, I'd often book Michelin-starred restaurants months in advance, buy him a custom-made suit or a watch, and then casually ask if he could be home by 8 p.m. He was almost always too busy. Last year on our anniversary, he spent the whole night with Chloe in the ER because she had an allergic reaction. Her reaction was that she couldn't understand how the American healthcare system worked anymore. I ate a cold steak alone in the restaurant. Arthur's voice choked. I made a reservation at your favorite canless restaurant. Let's go have dinner. Okay. I looked at him and asked. Do you know I haven't had steak at Canless in 3 years? He froze. I haven't had red meat since my stomach ulcer bled, I said. His hand slowly slid off the box. He didn't know. Of course. He didn't know. He knew Chloe was allergic to pollen. Afraid of the dark. And drank matcha but not coffee. But he didn't know I couldn't eat steak anymore. He also didn't know exactly when I stopped caring about our wedding anniversary. Just then, an Uber pulled up. Chloe Mercer practically fell off the back seat. She saw us standing there and stumbled. Tears instantly welled up in her eyes. Arthur. Arthur turned sharply, glaring at her. What are you doing here? Chloe jogged over, her voice trembling. Mrs. Sterling told me you were here. I didn't want to bother you. But the board just had an emergency meeting. Rick Caldwell's company sent a formal termination notice. The board wants you back in your office immediately. She looked at me. Valerie. I know you hate me. But Zennies is on the verge of a proxy fight. Can you help him this time? I stared at her. Her tears were so moving. And she always said things that sounded selfless. But she always seemed to magically appear just when Arthur was about to face reality. Do you really want me to help him? I asked. She blinked. If I go back, I said, I'll be in charge of strategic clients. My clients only report to me. Your $80,000 contingency budget will be fully audited by a third party, along with the person who signed off on the plagiarized construction plan. The board will hold me legally accountable. I took a step closer to her. Are you really sure you want me back? The color drained from her face instantly. Arthur looked at her. Chloe's lips trembled. I'm just worried about the company. No. I adjusted the suitcase in my arms. My voice as calm as an icebox. You're worried that if I come back, you'll be a failure again. Chloe's tears dried instantly. For the first time, she couldn't cry. Arthur's expression changed. He stared at Chloe, finally understanding what I'd been seeing for months, the scheming behind her panic. Chloe desperately grabbed his sleeve. Arthur. I didn't. I pulled a thick manila envelope from my bag and handed it to Arthur. He took it purely instinctively. The envelope was printed with divorce application. His hand froze. Valeria. You said marriage isn't a contract that can be dissolved at will. I looked at him. You're right. It requires a judge's signature. My lawyer submitted the documents this morning. Chloe stood there, terrified. Arthur stared at the envelope as if it were a grenade that could explode at any moment. I won't sign. You will, I said, if not today. Then during mediation, I walked around them and swiped my access card on the glass door. This time, Arthur didn't stop me. The lobby door slid shut. Through the glass, I saw him standing on the sidewalk, head down, staring at the divorce petition. Chloe stood 3 feet away, too afraid to touch him. I knew he was finally panicking. But the woman he was panicking for was gone. Arthur contacted me one last time via Zenith Tech's official email address. The tone was extremely formal. He invited me to an internal audit review regarding the transition of Zenith Tech accounts. The email explained that the board was demanding an explanation for lost revenue. And he invited me, as the former department head, to attend to clarify the transition timeline and stabilize team morale. I read the email and laughed. He was testing me. They wanted to force me into the room to testify for him. If I stood before the board and said the transition was amicable, the clients would only be frightened. Arthur would surely weather this coup. Why should I do it? I replied. I will attend. I will only state verifiable facts. I take no responsibility for the outcome. 5 minutes later. He understood. He had no choice. The meeting was held on a Friday afternoon in Zenith's main conference room. When I walked in, the room was packed, the entire team. Board members. Marcus from HR. Maya from finance. And Julian and Liam from my former team. Chloe sat in a corner, looking exhausted. Arthur stood at the head of the table. When he saw me, his gaze locked on me, pleading with me not to sit in the seat reserved for me next to him. I sat in an empty chair near the exit. Arthur cleared his throat. Recently, Zenith has experienced some turmoil. Outsiders have misunderstood our internal restructuring. We've invited Valerie today to clarify the timeline. He looked at me. Valerie, please speak. I stood up and plugged a USB drive into the laptop on the podium. Okay. The massive OLED screen lit up. This wasn't a slideshow about market dynamics. It was a list of human resources restructuring measures. A collective gasp echoed in the conference room. Arthur's face contorted. Valerie. Since we're going to get down to business, I interrupted him. My voice clear, let's start here. This is the official document I received the day I resigned. My name is on the first line. And Arthur Sterling approved a 40% pay cut. Chloe slumped lower in her chair. I pressed the remote. Next slide. This is a client handover list drafted by Chloe Mercer 3 days after she joined the company. It clearly states that my Tier 1 clients will be handed over to Ms. Mercer within 90 days. A board member murmured. So, this was premeditated. Next slide. This is an $80,000 contingency budget from my department's operating reserves to pay Ms. Mercer's salary. If this money comes through, our engineering team won't be able to pay salaries for fourth quarter deliverables. Maya from the finance department looked down at her knees. I didn't name names. I just let the documents speak for themselves. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. Enough. These are internal management drafts, lacking the background information required for a board meeting. I looked at him. Then why did you invite me here? To make me lie to the board. His face turned deathly pale. I clicked on the next slide. Plagiarized proposal. This was the business proposal Miss Mercer had sent to Rick Caldwell. She had changed the phased rollout to a bundled release. And the maintenance cost was lower than our server hosting costs. The VP of engineering practically yelled. I pointed it out a long time ago. She told us Arthur had approved it. Everyone looked at Arthur. Chloe jumped up in alarm. I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to close the deal quickly so everyone would respect me. Valerie is just twisting the facts to embarrass me. I looked at her. Ambitiousness doesn't give you the right to commit corporate malfeasance. Her eyes were filled with tears. Valerie, why are you doing this to me? I know. I'm not as good as you. But I meant no harm. Everyone compares me to you. The pressure is immense. Some of the new employees in the room looked at her with pity. Her act of playing the victim was flawless. I clicked on the last slide. It was a screenshot of a text message she sent me. Arthur said I was the only one he could be himself with. No longer having to play the CEO. The meeting room was deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Kohler's sobs caught in her throat. Arthur looked like he'd been shot. I didn't comment. I just asked. Is this also part of the pressure at the company? Kohler's lips trembled. I misspoke. That's what you mean. I lowered my voice. My tone calm. You want more than just my office. No one in the room dared to breathe. I turned off the projector. I'm not here to fight a divorce before the board. I'm here to establish 3 principles. The facts were clear. I held up one finger. First, before I resigned, I had completed a flawless, completely legal and compliant handover. I did not commit any malicious acts of sabotage. Second, the clients froze their contracts because the new management's proposals were incompetent and the resulting liability risks. Not because I manipulated them. Third, from the date of my departure, I am completely released from any legal or financial liability to Zenith Tech. I looked around. Marcus from HR stood up. His voice trembled slightly, but his tone was firm. I could confirm to the board that Valerie Sterling's departure process was entirely compliant. 3 days later, Arthur ordered me to remove her resignation from the system. I refused. Because it was illegal. The chairman of the board glared at Arthur. Liam then stood up. I confirmed that Valerie had filed all the documents. Chloe Mercer later requested access to Valerie's encrypted personal notes. We refused. Julian stood up. I confirmed this. People stood up one by one. Those who had been keeping their heads down began to stand up. Arthur stood alone at the head of the table. All alone. Chloe sat in her chair. Tears streaming down her face. But no one offered her any more tissues. I grabbed my bag. Things are cleared up. I turned to leave. Arthur's voice choked behind me. Valerie. Do you really have to ruin everything? I stopped at the door and glanced back. You were the one who put our 5-year marriage on the restructuring list. Arthur. I was just carrying out layoffs. I walked out the door. The door slammed shut. And I heard the chairman say, Arthur. The board requires you to relinquish your executive status during an urgent review. I stood in the hallway and let out a long sigh. I didn't get applause. But I got my name back. And that was far more important than applause. The final settlement for signing the divorce papers was scheduled for Monday morning. I set the date. Arthur didn't text to confirm until Sunday night. Just a simple, I'll be there. I arrived at the King County Family Court building early. Outside, couples walked in hand to receive their marriage certificates. Looking both nervous and excited. I watched them and remembered standing on these steps 5 years ago. Back then, Arthur held my hand and said, Valerie, no matter how tough things get for the company, we'll get through it together. I believed him. It took me 5 years to understand that being together really meant me taking on all the burdens so he wouldn't have to. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Arthur walked up the steps. He was wearing a sharp black suit. Looking like he was going to a funeral. He slowed down when he saw me. Have you been waiting long? No. I handed him a folder containing the final asset division documents. Let's go in. He didn't take it. Can we talk first? I glanced at the long line at security. We've talked enough. I saw the seed round financial statements last night. His voice didn't seem to realize that the money from selling the apartment was never officially converted into equity or repaid. Why didn't you remind me? I looked at him. I did. He froze. After the series of funding. I said. I emailed you the accounts. You replied that couples shouldn't be so calculating. His face turned pale instantly. He remembered that incident. His mother wanted to buy the property on Mercer Island. Arthur said he was short of money at home and asked me to postpone the repayment. The postponement turned into a permanent one. I'll pay it all back in the settlement agreement, he said softly. Does it have to involve lawyers and contracts? Contracts don't destroy a marriage. Arthur. People who disrespect contracts do. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom. He didn't answer. Then it rang again. It was Chloe. He didn't answer again. You can answer, I said. I don't want to. But the phone kept buzzing. Finally. He couldn't take it anymore. Slid the answer button. And turned on speakerphone. Chloe's hysterical sobs immediately came through the speakerphone. Arthur. The internal auditors are at my desk. They say I have to sign an affidavit about budget discrepancies and plagiarism proposals. You have to come back and tell them you authorized it. Arthur closed his eyes. Chloe. Just cooperate with the auditors. She gasped. But you promised to protect me. I saw Arthur's knuckles turn white. Chloe completely panicked. Arthur. I admit I just wanted to prove myself. I admit I was jealous of Valerie. But you made me sign those documents. You can't just sell me out like that. Arthur's eyes snapped open. Chloe was still crying. I came back to Seattle because you told me there was a place for me here. You said Valerie was strong and wouldn't care. You said she was your wife and would stand up for you no matter what. The people walking up the courthouse steps began to stare at them. Arthur's face turned ashen. I'm not a bad person. Arthur. I'm just scared, Chloe cried. I'm scared you'll go back to her and leave me all alone. That's why I needed her title. Arthur hung up. He was finally forced to hear the cruel truth. But I'd known for months. He looked at me. His eyes filled with horror. Valerie. I didn't know she would think that. I swear you knew. I interrupted him. You just liked that she needed you. Liked that I always cleaned up her messes. His lips parted. But he was too weak to argue. We went through security and into the mediator's office. The lawyer checked our IDs and asked a standard legal question. Did both parties voluntarily agree to dissolve the marriage? Yes, I said. Arthur didn't answer immediately. The lawyer looked up at him. Arthur gripped the pen tightly. The veins on his hand bulging. His phone rang again. This time it was the Zenith board calling. He ignored it. The lawyer cleared his throat. Sir. Is this dissolution of the marriage voluntary on both sides? Arthur looked at me. In his eyes. I finally understood everything. I had waited 5 years for this moment. Regret. Pain. Despair. But 5 years was too late. I looked at him calmly. Arthur. Don't make me wait any longer. His eyes were red. After a long, agonizing silence, he whispered. Voluntary. The signing was faster than I expected. As I walked out of the courthouse with the final judgment, the Seattle sun pierced through the clouds. The legal documents were light. Almost too light to contain the end of 5 years of my life. But it was all over. Arthur followed behind me as I walked down the steps. Valerie. I stopped. Would we still be together if I hadn't brought Chloe into the company? I thought about it. Maybe it would just take longer. He flinched. The problem was never just Chloe, I said. The problem was that you always thought I'd never leave. A breeze blew in from Puget Sound, ruffling my hair. Arthur instinctively reached out to tuck it behind my ear. He put his hand behind my ear. As he always did. I took a step back. His hand hung in the air. Don't do that again, I said. He slowly lowered his hand. What are you going to do now? He didn't even finish his question. I finished it for him. I'll be fine. I wasn't reassuring him. I was telling myself. My Uber arrived. Before I could even open the door, Arthur blurted out. Can I still call you? I looked at him. Not because of work. And certainly not for personal reasons. He had nothing more to say. I closed the car door. As the Uber merged into traffic, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Arthur was still standing on the courthouse steps, clutching the divorce decree tightly, looking like someone who had finally realized he had let go of the only thing holding him together. I didn't cry. I simply took out my phone, changed his contact name from Arthur to Arthur Sterling, and unpinned him from the top of my message list. During the first month of the divorce, I was so busy I didn't even have time to look in the rearview mirror. Rick Caldwell introduced me to 2 other corporate tech companies as an independent risk consultant. I didn't rush to hire a large staff. I started a boutique LLC called Pierce Consulting, using my maiden name, because trust is built on sincerity, not connections. The day I signed my first big consulting contract, the meeting room was small. It didn't have panoramic glass walls like Zenith Tech, nor a large group of subordinates. But as I sat at the head of the table, I felt a deep sense of peace. Turning to the signature page, the client asked, Valerie, are you sure you only want to be a consultant? You don't want to build another huge company? I smiled. Maybe later. Right now, I'm enjoying doing things my own way. The client nodded. We hired you because you have a clear mind. I signed the contract. My name was Valerie Pierce. Not Mrs. Sterling. Not the former head of Zenith Technologies. Just Valerie Pierce. That afternoon, Marcus texted me. He had officially resigned from Zenith Technologies. Maya in the finance department had also submitted her resignation. Julian and Liam hadn't resigned yet, but they had both formally requested to be removed from all accounts related to Chloe's task force. Zenith's internal audit was very rigorous. Chloe's misappropriation of budget and the disastrous consequences of her plagiarized proposals resulted in the company losing 3 important contracts. The board stripped Arthur of his unilateral approval authority. Chloe resigned before being fired. Before she left, she posted a long message on her Slack public channel, claiming she was simply a victim of toxic company culture, Valerie Sterling's overbearing and suffocating attitude, and Arthur's broken promises. No one replied to the post. In the adult world, crying doesn't absolve you of your debts. Arthur was still the CEO, but only in name. It was no longer his absolute empire. When I saw this message on LinkedIn, I didn't feel a sense of vengeful satisfaction. I didn't want to see him fall. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't tied down by him when he did. That night, I was in my new office in South Lake Union. The setting sun cast a warm golden glow on the lake. I opened my laptop and saw an email from Arthur. Subject: sorry. I opened the email. It was long. He wrote that he had finally reviewed all the seed round ledgers and finally understood just how much of my money I had emptied to keep Zenith afloat. He wrote that when the board questioned him, he sat, for the first time, sitting in that oppressive chair. He realized the pressure I had shielded him from all those years. He wrote that when Kohler packed her desk, he didn't walk her to the elevator. He wrote that he drove past our old house on Capitol Hill, looked out the window at the empty foyer, and finally realized the house wasn't built on walls. He ended the letter with, "Bally, I'm not asking you to come back. I just needed to tell myself, to my face, that I was completely wrong." I read the email, archived it, and went back to work. I didn't reply, not out of malice, but because it was irrelevant. Some apologies are necessary to heal open wounds, but mine had scabbed over, and I didn't want it to reopen. At 8 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number. "Bally, I'm leaving Seattle. I used to be so jealous of you. And so afraid of you. I now realize I can't keep the chair I stole. I'm sorry." I read it and deleted it. I didn't need Kohler's final explanation either. At 9 p.m., my new Pierce Consulting Group chat suddenly buzzed. Marcus posted a selfie of himself and Maya drinking margaritas at a Mexican restaurant. Both beaming. Julian texted, "Valerie, I refuse to take responsibility for the terrible third-quarter forecast today," directly passing the buck to the vice president. Liam replied, "See, you finally drew the line." I smiled at the screen. It turns out that when one person decides to stand up straight, those around them are inspired and stop hunching over. That's more vengeful than any board coup. 6 months later, I ran into Arthur at the SAS conference in Austin. He was sitting in the audience, looking noticeably older. I was on the main stage signing a strategic partnership agreement between Pierce Consulting and a large logistics company when the stage lights suddenly shone on me. I suddenly remembered Arthur sitting on our apartment floor, promising to put me in the brightest spot in the room. Turns out I didn't need him to give me that spot. I walked over myself. After the applause, I stepped off the stage. Arthur was waiting for me at the end of the convention center corridor. He didn't get too close, maintaining a polite distance. "Val." I stopped. He held a legal envelope. "Final equity acquisition and apartment sale compensation. My lawyer wired the money this morning. This is the paper confirmation." "Thank you. You deserve it." He looked at me, his eyes seeming to hold 1,000 unspoken words. Finally, he simply said, "You look very happy." "I am." He smiled. A sad, self-deprecating thing. "I used to think you couldn't live without Zenith or without me." "I used to think that way too," I said calmly. His eyes sparkled. "Now, I finally understand that when you leave the wrong room, you finally become yourself." Down the hall, Rick Caldwell called out, "Valerie, the client's waiting for the toast." I glanced back at Arthur. "I have to go." He nodded firmly, his feet planted firmly, showing no intention of following me. I walked past him. This time he didn't reach for my wrist. He asked for nothing. I heard his voice behind me. It ended peacefully. "Valerie, all the best for you in the future." I paused for half a second. I didn't turn back. "And I hoped you would learn to respect those around you." This wasn't a good thing. This was just the final settlement. A year later, Pierce Consulting moved into its permanent office in downtown Seattle. It wasn't a large corporate campus, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows and plenty of natural light. I placed a fiddle-leaf fig tree by the window. It looked very similar to the one in my old office. Julian, who had just come for his VP interview, pointed to it. "Valerie, that plant is thriving." I smiled and poured us both a cup of coffee. "Yes. It turns out that life can survive if given the right environment." He didn't catch the double meaning, just nodded seriously. "Of course. Anything you build will exist." I looked at the broad green leaves and felt an incredible sense of lightness. For years, I had been the best shock absorber. I absorbed Zenith's financial losses. I saw through the cracks beneath the Sterling family's glamorous facade. I absorbed Kohler's incompetence. I silently endured the decay in my own marriage. I finally understand that you can't be everyone's emergency exit. If you leave the door open for everyone when a building is on fire, you'll end up as ashes yourself. I'm no longer Arthur Sterling's best interests. I'm no longer my safety net. My name is Valerie Pierce. I never intended to look for her.